Hey everybody, Arnaldo here, broadcasting from Fidelio's frequency. Welcome to my channel. Buy now or cry later. You're probably wondering what this video is going to be about. Some of you that are into record collecting and people that are a part of the vinyl community probably know what this is about. It's about records that have increased tremendously in price, some for valid reason and some that probably you would never expected to be so pricey because now they are out of print or because they were a limited run. I will be focusing on, let's just say, a few types of records that have gone up in value, some that I would have expected and some that I wouldn't have. So we'll take a look at these right after the intro. During this video, I'll be taking a look at either records that were produced in large quantities that were highly and readily and easily available while they were out for the first couple of years. Let's call them major label releases or releases from artists that are very, very popular, and some other smaller labels, mostly reissue labels, that some may expect to be limited in quantity, but for one reason or another, some record buyers may have thought that they would have stayed in print for a little bit longer and missed the boat in buying them when they were easily available. So I'd like to start off with a record by an artist, a huge artist, currently distributed through Columbia Sony. Yes, her records are licensed to Sony, and she's hugely popular, Beyonce. And you would think that Beyonce records would always be in print. And lo and behold, her self-titled album, named just Beyonce, is currently out of print. It came out in 2014, so just 11 years ago, and had some huge hits on here. Most notably, Drunken Love, Blow, Flawless are on here. And Beyonce is an active artist. She continues releasing albums. She continues to tour. She's just wrapping up her Cowboy Carter tour. And for some reason, this album is not available on vinyl. Yes, probably someone would expect this album to not always be in print because it was a limited visual album. However, it's not even available as a regular, just plain black album with no bells and whistles. And at the moment, this album has been reaching ridiculously high prices. And if we take a look at Discogs, on the low end, it goes for around $200. And on the top end, some sealed copies go for over $400. Average price is in almost the 300s. So if you happen to find any stock, any copies of this just sitting in a bin of your local record store, I would suggest picking it up, because most likely, or actually probably, it's very possible that if and when it gets reissued, it probably won't have the same configuration. If it gets reissued on vinyl, maybe it might not include the accompanying DVD or the big booklet that was included at the time. I'm pretty sure an artist like Beyonce will not want to keep this album out of print on vinyl for much longer. So just be patient, it may come back, but I was quite surprised to see how over the last couple of years, this album has remained out of print and has gone up significantly in price on the secondary market. Another artist that I was very surprised, very big artist, maybe not as big as Beyonce, but she's up there. She's iconic. She's been making music, I want to say, for almost 40 years, I guess mid to late 80s, and she's an icon, like I said. And I'm talking about Janet Jackson and her last album, the last album that she released, which was in 2016. The name of the album is Unbreakable, and this is still not in print, and on vinyl at least. And at the time it came out in 2 different configurations of vinyl. I think there were 2 different alternate covers. This one with the eyes closed, and then there's a cover with the eyes open, but neither one of them is in print. Probably you can still find the CD, you can probably stream it and all that, but the value or the prices for this album have increased significantly. And if we take a look at Discogs at the moment, it was going for around $100, and it peaked around $180 for this record. So still out of print, averaging around $100, $115. I would recommend, again, if you happen to find it. I have never come across any copies of this, probably because not that many were pressed back in 2016, because probably there wasn't that much demand on of this type of record on vinyl. So grab it if you see it at a good price. Next up is another icon. He passed away in 2016. He is one of my all-time favorite artists, and his final album, called Blackstar, which was released only a few days before his passing in January of 2016, is still out of print. And this one makes a little bit more sense than with respect to the previous 2 that I talked about, because when it was released in 2016, David Bowie had a license to release his albums through Columbia, Sony, and I'm guessing that license has expired, also because there was a change in ownership by the Bowie estate of the entire catalog, which I believe was sold to Warner. I can't imagine this album being out of print on vinyl for much longer. But for now, the prices have skyrocketed, and I was actually quite surprised. Yes, this is probably the more difficult version to find and probably won't be repressed. It's a clear vinyl version, which was a Bowie web store and Barnes & Noble exclusive, which went out of print almost immediately. There was a very short run, so you would expect a limited color variant to go out of print, but even the regular black vinyl of Blackstar has increased in prices, and I was actually quite surprised when I saw it on display at a record store on the wall for around $100, and I was wondering, it's like, why is that? Because for a minute I thought maybe that's the clear one, and that wasn't the case. It was just the plain regular black vinyl version. And then that's when I looked on Discogs. I'm like, why is this so expensive? Lo and behold, currently on Discogs, yes, the lowest price maybe about a year ago was around $60. It's averaging around $80, but sometimes it's gone up to as much as $130. So that was quite surprising for me, for the probably one of the most iconic albums of David Bowie's catalog to still be out of print on vinyl. But somehow it does make sense, because it's probably switching hands in terms of ownership, and I'm almost most positive, be patient if you want this album on vinyl. It will definitely be repressed at some point. And the last of the major label artist releases that I did want to show you is probably it's a band, probably not as iconic as Beyonce, David Bowie, or Janet Jackson that we just talked about, but nonetheless a hugely popular band in the 90s. They continued through the early 2000s, took a hiatus while the lead singer focused on her solo career, but came back with 2 new albums. The first one released in 2017, and that is the one that we're going to take a look at, and it's by the Cranberries, called Something Else. This album features reinterpretations, mostly acoustic reinterpretations with orchestra arrangements of earlier hits and other songs of their catalog, in addition to, I believe, 3 new tracks, one of which is called Why, and I remember it's probably one of my favorite of the new tracks, and probably one of the best of the Cranberries. And I remember at the time, Dolores O'Riordan said that Why was probably one of the best songs that she had written. Sadly, also, Dolores O'Riordan is no longer with us, and it could have been her passing that may have given the final boost to their catalog, and hence why whatever was still available in retail of whatever remaining copies on vinyl on retail were available, they were sold almost immediately after her passing. But let's take a look at what this album, strangely for me, because it's such an important album for the Cranberries, goes for on Discogs. At the minimum, it's been selling for $250, and it's reached a peak of almost $350, which for me is quite astounding considering it's such a recent release. It only came out in 2017. So if these records that I just talked about by major artists teach us anything, is that these aren't necessarily variants or limited editions that were announced as such that went out of print, is probably a good indication of buy now or cry later, because you never know which album by which artist, considering these were all very popular artists and very successful albums, that may or may not be in print at some point. And it's a very complex type of scenario because a lot of things come into play. There's licenses that may have to be renewed by these major label artists, or maybe there isn't that much of a demand for that specific artist or that specific genre on the vinyl format. So does anyone have a crystal ball? Probably not, but I would say that definitely if you like an album and you want it on vinyl, don't hesitate, because you may not find it in the future. So those were probably the surprises of the video, where major label artists, very commercially successful records and very important records, are still out of print on vinyl. But now we'll talk a little bit about albums that probably, if you're looking for them now and they're expensive, you should have known better. And this is probably because they were released by reissue labels, more in the vein of audiophile releases that typically are known to be more of a limited run. So it's not surprising that some of these records are out of print, and the prices that some of these records command are quite hefty, and that is also not surprising. Also because one of the labels that I will showcase a few records from, their president and the main public figure of their record, Chad Kassem, and I'm talking about Analog Productions or Acoustic Sounds, that is his moniker, buy now or cry later. He's really right about that, because a lot of his releases are, I would say almost exclusively 90%, 95% of his releases are licensed. And you should know very well that major label artists or artists that are, let's say, own their own masters will license out the right to produce their records or press records in audiophile format only for a limited period of time, after which the license expires and whatever stock is remaining either really gets sold off quickly or immediately skyrockets in price. So Analog Productions did a whole series, I think it was in 2015. They repressed and reissued the majority of the Beach Boys catalog, and I think I purchased all of the Analog Production run. They did both mono and stereo versions, but some minor albums currently are out of print, probably will never come back in print, and currently are going for pretty hefty prices. Most notably, the Beach Boys Today. And let's take a look on Discogs. This record has peaked at around almost $200, sometimes $300 recently. So I'm not surprised in this case, especially now that we lost also Brian Wilson, that most people are rushing to buy his records. Yes, probably all the Capitol versions will stay in print forever. There's really no rush to get those, but all of these audiophile releases that were released by Analog Productions are becoming a little more scarce now that there's been this surge demand for Beach Boys albums, Brian Wilson albums, and along with Beach Boys Today, another album that piqued my interest, my curiosity, because then I went down like a little mini rabbit hole to find out what other Beach Boys albums released by Analog Productions have surged in price. And that would be Summer Days and Summer Nights. This album on Discogs is currently going for around $200, averaging around $150, and at the minimum, it's a $110 record. So who would have thought, right? Most people would know better. People that are audiophiles and that are into more kind of limited runs and curated, especially by Analog Productions, know that there's only a limited amount of time that Analog Productions has to keep these in print. And once it expires, once the license expires, they're gone. And buy now, cry later. So I couldn't make a video about records and specifically audiophile releases that have gone up in price without talking about Mobile Fidelity. As I mentioned, for Analog Productions, Mobile Fidelity also operates based on licenses of records from major labels, and that in itself gives you kind of a warning that these records may not always be in print. So you should buy them sooner rather than later, because at some point you won't be able to. But it has surprised me sometimes how short the license is and how quickly the label, it could be only either a matter of time, a license based on a matter of time, so maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 years, or a limited run of copies, say only 5,000. And once the 5,000 are gone, that's it. There's no more. So it's hard to predict, will the 5,000 or 2,000 sell through in a year, in 6 months, or maybe even a month. So 2 of them I'd like to talk about. One is a record that I was seeking because I'm a big fan of this record. I love the Pixies. Doolittle is my favorite album, and Doolittle apparently still falls in the category of the records that Mobile Fidelity produced, all analog. Most of you know the whole DSD debacle of about 2 years ago. I think this one, according to various sources, issued in 2009, was all cut from analog tape. So I think maybe because of that, it has still retained its value or gone up in price because it's now out of print. I don't remember how short of a period it was in print for, but right now, if you're looking for this record, which only was released in 2009, it could go upwards of more than $200, and at the minimum, it's a $100 record. And the last one that I'd like to talk about, also from Mobile Fidelity, huge artist, and I want to say that they did a good chunk of his catalog. They licensed, I want to say, probably all of his 60s and some of his 70s output. Bob Dylan, some of them in mono, some of them in stereo, some both, some double 45, some just 33. The reissues seemed like they were never ending for Bob Dylan's catalog on Mobile Fidelity. And this one, if I'm not mistaken, came out in 2016. And it's already out of print, and it's already going for crazy prices. So you would think some other Bob Dylan albums are still currently in print by Mobile Fidelity, and some are not. So it's kind of highly unpredictable to know which ones you need to buy sooner rather than later. But this one, let's take a look at Discogs, what the current pricing is. It's going for over $200 if you get a sealed copy, or at least around $140. Yes, it's a double 45, so probably you do get a little bit more of a bang for your buck, because I think maybe they were 70 at the time when they came out. So yeah, that's another Mobile Fidelity record, and I'm sure there's plenty more that have gone up in price. I won't mention it, I don't have it, even though it was sourced. It came out that it was sourced afterwards in DSD, and that is the Abraxas by Santana. I think that is probably the most expensive Mobile Fidelity. It was issued in a one-step box set, currently going for $1,600 or something like that. And who would have thought, right, when it came out, that it was going to be that sought after afterwards? So is there a general rule of thumb in record collecting, or just record buying? There is and there isn't. The first takeaway is quite surprising that artists, icons, major label artists, very successful artists, commercially successful albums go out of print. Namely the Beyonce that we looked at, Janet Jackson, or David Bowie's final album. Who knows? I'm sure at some point they will be in print, but right now, there's no sign of them being repressed, so they're commanding really high prices on the secondary market. And of course, we have the reissue labels. Those seem to be more predictable in a certain way, in as much as while they're still around, if you like them, if you're interested, I would say get them before they go out of print, and they will never, most certainly, come back, because once that record label or that reissue label, like Analog Productions or Mobile Fidelity, runs out their license, they may or may not want to renew it. Chad Kassem, thank you so much for providing me the quote or the title to my video, Buy Now or Cry Later. And thank you everyone for watching. Please don't forget to like or dislike, leave a comment, and most importantly, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It brings more viewers in, more opportunities for the channel to grow. And I guess that's it for today. Once again, thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.